What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Phightin Words. Anthony SanFilippo's here. I'm Bob Wankel. Saturday morning, something a little bit different. It's going to be Anthony, myself, and probably my two children up above us right now, who I can hear arguing over a blueberry waffle. So this is going to be a really exciting episode, fun stuff. Phillies with another clunker last night, Anthony, and I'm ready to go today. Like this is when I thrive. I had somebody send me a message on X the other night during the Chris Sale Braves game saying that nobody is happier when the Phillies lose than Bob Wankel. And I wanted to push back against that because the guy was being a smart ass, but then I thought a little bit about it. And I said, while I disagree, I get the premise of the tweet. So here we are.
Yeah, I don't think that you're happy when they lose. I think that you're more amped up. You're more ready to talk. You're more ready to dive into the team when they lose because when they win, it's just kind of like good for the Phillies. Like when they lose, you have 800,000 things you want to attack.
Well, it's funny because that's the Gelb podcast, Phillies Therapy. When they released that show and I saw the show title, I was like, really? I said, this is more of like the therapy session. Like this is more of like the pure venting and like trying to talk through what you're watching. But
yeah.
I mean, here's where I kind of just like want to set the stage for today, and I kind of let you take the lead. You've been down there all week. You're kind of going through it a little bit more. The thing I will say is this: the Phillies are at a spot where they're clearly one of the best teams in the National League. They're clearly one of the better teams in Major League Baseball. We know what has happened the past few seasons. We know that they have a chance here to compete for a championship this season. And there's a lot of good things that you can lean into, but it's just so clearly obvious that this team is deficient in some pretty important ways. And that if they don't rectify those deficiencies, at least in some capacity, they're not going to win a championship. And so I'm having a hard time at the moment. And I think I think some fans have actually done a better job than what I would have expected. I think there's a lot of people that can say this is a really good baseball team and I'm enjoying this ride, but it's impossible to fully enjoy the ride because you know that what you're watching right now is an unfinished product. Like I'm looking at this, like keep stacking wins, put yourself in a position that come July, you can do the things that you want to do and need to do. And then what that team looks like come August, come September, it's one that you really believe has a chance to win a championship. Because I think what we're seeing here as the level of competition has increased, and not that this has been a disastrous homestand or anything like that so far, but the flaws that you kind of knew were there when they were ripping off the 9 in a row, they are very much there. And I think that is what we're seeing here a little bit this week. And not to mention teams cool down, and they're just cooling down a little bit right now. It's the first time they've lost back-to-back games in over a month.
Yeah, since April 23rd and April 20th, since the 5-game losing streak, since they got swept by the Mets and lost that first game in Chicago against the Cubs, that they haven't lost back-to-back games since then until last night. So, yeah, I mean, it was only a matter of time before they did cool down a little bit, right? And we saw that over the last couple of games. Last night against the Brewers, the Brewers threw DL Hall for the first 3 innings. He didn't allow a hit. And then Quinn Priester, by the way, 6 innings of relief, allowed just 4 hits, 2 runs. And the best part about that, Bob, every at-bat was so feeble by the Phillies, other than, Castellanos' home run and then, Schwarber's 2 doubles. The reason I say they were so feeble, he didn't strike out anybody, Quinn Priester. He didn't walk anybody. He pitched 6 innings, got 18 outs, 16 of them on ground balls.
Yeah.
There was some of the worst at bats I've ever seen in a game. It was just one feeble swing after another. And, look, you're going to have bad games, right? Those things are going to happen. Everybody's going to, of course, all the haters are going to devolve back into, see, here's this lineup, can't do this. This is what they do. They go ice cold. If this continues for like 4 or 5 games, then you can make that argument. Yeah. But I think, just in one game, it was just a bad night. But that said, there were a couple of guys who were in the lineup where you're sitting there like, this isn't good enough. Like, this is not, and doesn't work. And then you look at the starting pitching and you're like, yeah, I think that the shine is off Taijuan Walker at this point. Time for him to go back to the bullpen. Speaking of the bullpen, you look at the bullpen and you're like, wasn't awful, but it was leaky. And like that's got to be fixed and rectified. So there are so many little things that when they add up, it's like, if the Phillies don't fix this, they have to see it, right? We see it. We talk about it. They have to see it too. Yeah. And if they don't, it would be an utter disgrace in my mind to not fix it in a season where you are all in to win a championship.
I talk about this a lot. I think most people that listen to the show, and I don't know how people consume baseball. Maybe people are watching the whip around action on MLB Network every night and have a really great feel for the entire league and all 30 lineups. But I think one thing that gets lost a lot of times is that even statistically outstanding lineups go through periods or have games where they look feeble or they look like, man, this lineup isn't really that good. And, the Phillies are banging the ball all around the yard against the Rockies and the A's, and they're stacking 17-hit games, and all of a sudden we're talking about, they're 7th in runs per game, they're 4th in on-base percentage, they're 3rd in average, and the numbers are the numbers. And when you finish the 162, I think that this team probably finishes top 10 to top 12 in a lot of categories. And so you say this is a pretty decent offense. It's certainly an above average offense. Is it an elite offense? Probably not. Is one of the best offenses that I've ever seen out of a Phillies team? Certainly not. But it's still a decent lineup. The problem is, though, when you watch games like last night, especially when they come off the heels of a game like you saw on Wednesday night against the Braves, or I'm sorry, on Thursday night against the Braves and Chris Sale, and even the first game of the series that they win 2-0 where they don't hit, you're like, all right, now I'm starting to watch a few games strung together here. And then I go down the lineup and I look at different parts of it, and I'm like, Alec Bohm, who I want to get to in a little bit again, because you wrote a really awesome story about Alec Bohm and how he's kind of gotten himself stabilized here, and I want to rip that to shreds, that concept, and I want to talk about him today. It was a great story, though. And you look at Castellanos, and I want to talk about him in depth. But then, like, those guys aren't total zeros or anything like that. You can just poke holes in the game a little bit. But then you start to look at where Real Muto's at in the decline. We've talked about him. We talked about him earlier this week, actually. You talk about what's going on at second base. Like, relative to the rest of the league's second baseman, Bryson Stott's numbers aren't that bad. But you kind of watch Bryson Stott and you're like, there's got to be more to this, right? There's got to be more to this. Center field being center field. Like, left field being left field. Like, this team just feels like we keep saying one hitter short. I don't think they're going to be able to do more than that. Yeah. In terms of additions, but it feels like they're like 2 hitters short and some guys really needing to kind of crank up their games a little bit. This offense does leave like a little bit to be desired.
Yeah, and you could see, and we're gonna talk Bryce Harper too. Obviously, we haven't had a chance to discuss Harper's situation ever since he
just
was
put him on the IL. Like, for God's sake.
Yeah, like, but so like
over the last 3 years that have held on to a player for 5-6 days post injury and then retroactively put him on the IL more than the Phillies.
No, and they really, the deadline to do that was yesterday, right? You're only allowed to, push it back. What, for the next 4 days out? I think it is.
Do you play this weekend, or do you think they're just punting into next week at this point?
No, I think you're looking maybe Monday. So I think that, and we'll get to Harper because I think that ultimately the decision is if we had put him on the IL, he would have to be out till next Friday. We don't want to lose 3 or 4 games out of Bryce Harper. We think he can be back before then. And so I really think that's what it is. But the to the initial point here, the lineup really looks thin when you take Harper out of it, right? I mean, that's, I know I'm saying, I'm Captain Obvious there, but the reality of it is that that lineup was kind of humming along, and Harper was starting to play a little bit better, hitting a little bit better, and it kind of had guys in better spots in the lineup. And then all of a sudden you kind of take him out of the mix, and it's like, well, what's left? And it just didn't seem to work as well without Bryce in that lineup. Even though
it looked like last night you're watching a game where it was Kyle Schwarber and 8 guys. That's what it looked like last night.
Yeah.
So, all right, I guess let's start here. You write a story earlier in the week. Obviously JT Realmuto is struggling. We asked the question on this show, and I believe it was actually posed to Rob at some point, maybe over the weekend, maybe after Sunday's game. It was in Sacramento. Is it time to maybe move Alec Bohm up, given that he's swinging the bat better? JT's struggling a little bit, and then lo and behold, the Braves series starts, and you have Bohm kind of kicked up to the middle of the order. And you had done a story, and why don't you just talk a little bit about that story and how that kind of came about? And I know you were a little bit caught off guard by it, even.
Yeah, it really was, and so there had been conversation about potentially swapping Bohm and Realmuto in the lineup, like you said, out on the West Coast. And so they come home on Tuesday, the first game back, and they're playing the Braves, and the lineup comes out. And not only did they swap them, but Rob moved Bohm all the way up to the 5 spot. So he actually bumped a bunch of guys down. He bumped Castellanos down to 6, Kepler down to 7, and Realmuto down to 8 in that game. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about the lineup switch. And honestly, I went into this interview with Bohm. I grabbed him on the field one-on-one, and I went into it kind of thinking like, hey, my first question in all honesty was, do we make too much of this lineup? Like structure, like, do players really think about it? Does it really, get into your head about where you're at in the lineup? And he didn't give me one of the answers I thought he was going to give, which was like, yeah, you guys make too much out of it. Doesn't matter where we hit, blah, blah, blah. He kind of said, yeah, you think about it a little bit. And I was like, oh, well, let's explore this. And so we talked about it. And the first thing was like, I asked him, I said, do you look at it as a reward because you've been hitting in 330 or whatever it is over the last month and a half? And, and he's like, yeah, I kind of do. Like, yeah, I'm swinging it well, right? So, like, it's good. I see, I'm hitting 5th in a game where I'm usually batting 7th or 8th. Yeah, I look at that and think, he says, but then you got to leave it right there. He says, go out and, continue doing what you're doing. You can't just sit back on your laurels. Okay, fine. But then so I started diving into it with him a little bit more. And I said, well, you've been going well for a while. Was it at the beginning of the year where, what changed? Like what you said, I remember it was an interview and I forget where they were because I watched it on TV. It was on the road. And I said, you said at some point that, the game is teaching you a lesson. And I'm just wondering what that lesson was and what you adjusted to get going in the right direction. And he goes, well, to be honest with you, beginning of the season, and I'm paraphrasing here, this isn't an exact quote, but he says, beginning of the season, you're getting a lot of information at once. And you're looking at everything, and then a week ends up feeling like a month when you struggle because you're looking at the numbers, right? And that's such a small sample size. When you look at those numbers, you could be, 1 for 8 and your batting average is 125, right? I mean, like, so all of a sudden you're looking at it and you go, oh my God, like how bad is it really? And it's a little bit easier to climb out of get on a little bit of a hot streak and turn those numbers around. But when you have an extended 2-week bad start, which really that's what it was for him, it was 2 weeks. It looked awful, right? I mean, he was batting on April 14th. I think he was batting 150 with a 331 OPS or whatever it was. So he said, I let it get into my head a little bit too much. Like I was looking at the numbers and not focusing on the process that I was doing. He said, you got to focus on the process. I started doing that again. And I got going back to the kind of player that I normally am. And so I was kind of taken aback by his honesty about it. Like here's a guy who we've wondered if he's a little bit of a mental player. And I don't mean to say that in a negative way, but someone who lets the game get into his head a little bit. And he admitted that he was. And I was, well, okay, like that's something. So that's what led to the genesis of that story. I was really kind of looking at it from, I was going to try and talk to Realmuto too, because, hey, he got bumped down to 8. Yeah. Just wanted to kind of look at it from that perspective, but it really turned into a thing with Bohm. And I appreciate his honesty, but I still worry about that a little bit. Like the next time there's a 2-week stretch, how bad is it going to get for him?
So it's kind of a strange way to diagnose that part of his game and really try to assess his entire season. on one hand, I give him a lot of credit given his start. And I mean, it was historically bad. I mean, we're not talking about, he's hitting 175 and he's 524 OPS. I mean, we're talking like one of the worst starts I've ever seen for an everyday Phillies player, and certainly one of the worst starts in the league this season. And so he's done a nice job. He's hit 316 in May, and that's despite struggling on this recent homestand. These numbers have plummeted a little bit. He's got an 838 OPS in the month of May. And so he's been able to get up off the mat. And if he were truly mentally weak, if he were a guy that you're like, this guy is such a head case that you just can't trust him at all. And that's been one of the talking points here and one of the criticisms of him by some. And I mean, I've knocked on the door of that. I don't know that I've ever been quite that strong. But if that were truly the case, I think that start would have completely spiraled. And I don't know that he gets back up. Like, I don't know that you get off the ropes or you get off the mat at that point. Maybe you just become a part-time player and you try to do a hard reset, unplug for 2 weeks, what have you. So the fact that he's been able to rally and perform at a fairly consistent level here this month, I think says something about him. Now, here's what I don't know, and here's what I want you to kind of check me on. Because I texted you this the other night. I said, now, while this is true, is it fair to say it feels like, though, every time expectations come back into play with him, he has a hard time clearing that hurdle? Like, he gets to the All-Star break last season, and you're like, damn, like, Alec Bohm's finally realizing his full potential. Like, this is the player we kind of thought this guy might be. And then he falls off the cliff. And then the playoffs roll around, and he really falls off the cliff. And then now here it is this offseason. Well, he's got another chance. He's back here. He has an opportunity to kind of re-cement himself as the hitter that we saw in the first half of last year. Terrible. The expectations go completely out the door, and he's kind of almost like left for dead, and he can get back up. But now here we are, Alec, you're back in the 5 spot. We really need you to provide some punch in the middle of this lineup and stay hot. 2 for 16. Like, what do you make of that?
Yeah, it's a it's a great observation by you, right? And maybe he is just that kind of player who needs to be in a lesser spotlight to excel. I mean, there are players like that just they're better in less pressured environments and less pressured situations. So maybe batting, it was going so well with him batting at the bottom of that lineup, right?
It's not just about hitting 5th. It's about hitting 5th for the Phillies, a team that if you cough the wrong way, people are going to analyze it, myself included.
Yeah.
It's
I want
to, it's hard here.
Yeah. I want to get to this because Broken Bell Network put a couple of comments up and I want to show them because it relates exactly to what you just said. He said, Cassidy started the season last year the same way. Negadelphians have no concept of 162. Panic in April is silly. And he follows up by saying he gets the Bohmies. He just needs to fix his face. And I think it's an interesting observation. What that means is he wears it. And he wears it in such a way that even the fans can see it. And even fans who maybe overreact to a bad 4 games, right? Where he's batting in the middle of the lineup. And they can see it. And so maybe if he didn't wear it so blatantly, it wouldn't be such a talking point. It wouldn't be something that we observe as easily. Not to say that it doesn't exist. It may still exist, but it maybe isn't something we observe as easily as we do because we see it on his face. But I think that you may be onto something here, Bob, because like I said, he struggled at the beginning of the year when he was batting, in a more important spot. Rob dropped him to 8 for the most part. It's where he's batted the most this year. 21 games he's hit out of the 8 hole. And when he was hitting 7 or 8 is where he's gotten on this stretch where he's got that 830 whatever OPS. But then as soon as he gets put back into a role in the 5th spot, and then since Harper's been out batting 3rd or 4th, he's not come through again. And so it's almost like he puts more pressure on himself to do something to carry the team rather than just go out there and be the guy that he's been for the past 5 weeks.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, to the comment there from the Broken Bell Network. I mean, look, I'm guilty of that. I think everyone to some degree is guilty of that. You can remind yourself that it's a long season and 162 is 162 all you want. Anytime we have a conversation in April, I mean, I go to great lengths to be like, small sample size. It's April. We know this. But, my assessments of Alec Bohm and what I'm trying to figure out in the moment here really don't just have to do with 2 months of baseball. It's been an entire career since we first saw him in 2020. I mean, I think that there's enough data here that both contextually and then just the pure numbers that you can start to put some of this together. Like, here's what I'll tell you. Like, we're talking about a guy who was just in the middle of an 11-game hitting streak that ended last night. So it's not like he's been dreadful here. And in this homestand, I actually misspoke. On this homestand, he's 3 for 16. Okay. Here's the only problem. Again, like, no extra base hits. He's only walked once. Like, here's like what I know. Here's what I know about this guy right now. I think we've seen the absolute worst of Alec Bohm this season, and I think we've seen some pretty damn good hitting from Alec Bohm for a somewhat prolonged stretch this season. But when it all comes out together, here's where we're at this morning. 22 qualified third basemen so far this season. He's 16th in Fangraphs WAR. He's 16th in slugging. He's 18th in on-base percentage. He's dead last in walk rate of those qualified third basemen, 16th in home runs. And here's the thing that's really interesting. He hits the ball hard, and he does hit the ball hard. In fact, of all of those qualified third basemen, he's hit the ball 95 miles per hour or harder, the second most this season. He has the second most balls put in play at that velocity. What does he have to show for it? Not a lot. And by way of power, almost nothing. And part of the reason why is because he's third in ground ball percentage. He comes up and this has been the thing and the knock on his game. And I know that some fans love it. They're like, oh man, look, he uses all fields. He hit a 5-hopper between first and second base. And like, awesome. I wish more of our guys would do that. But that comes at such a cost. Like, that comes at a cost of doing real damage on a consistent basis. And you can't change who you are as a hitter necessarily. Like, I think that's very much just in his DNA. And it has been to some degree what has made him successful as a hitter. So I'm not saying you just undo all of that, but like, at some point, like, I'll look at his month and say, good job. Like, this was a good month. And you're now like, you've saved your season. Like, you're not talking about a guy that's trying to punch just a clear 200, right? But like, look at his May, and we'll see how today goes. But you say he's sitting here at 316 for the month. He spent 10 games playing in Sacramento, down in Tampa, and in Colorado. Like, 10 of the games this month have come in just bandboxes against shitty pitching. Like, and this
as
is what
SJK says, so if Bohm batted ninth for the Rockies, he'd be Babe Ruth.
Maybe. Like, and I don't. Like, you want to be fair to the guy, like, trying to have a real conversation here. Like, this isn't just like, oh, this guy stinks. Like, that's not what we're doing. But
right.
My thing with him all along is like, I've just always wanted a little bit more. And like, when you compare him and stack the numbers up against the rest of the third baseman in baseball, maybe it gets amplified because JT Realmuto is not the same hitter that he used to be. Or maybe it gets amplified because they don't have a center fielder. Or maybe it gets amplified because like left field has a gaping platoon hole in it. Or maybe it gets amplified because the right fielder doesn't drive the baseball anymore, or isn't this season. I know he homered last night. He's on pace for 14 home runs this year.
His last two hits are a double and a homer.
Yeah. He's 748 OPS all of a sudden. So maybe Rob was right that they're going to come in bunches. Maybe they will. Like, again, it's early. It doesn't mean he's going to hit 14 home runs this year. But my point being is because the lineup sort of like lacks that beyond Schwarber and Harper, assuming that he ends up where you think he's going to end up, it just lacks like real punch and thump, and there's a lack of scariness to the lineup. And so maybe a guy like Bohm, who's going to finish at 284 and struggle to maybe clear 700 OPS because he doesn't walk and doesn't hit for power, maybe that's fine. And like, it doesn't mean that he's not going to be a 13-year player somewhere. Like, it just leaves me wanting a lot more.
You got support from, well, not that one, from Ryan Barnhart, who says Bob has been on it forever. For a guy with the size and power that Bohm has, what the potential is and what he gives the team is really disappointing. And I think that that's fair, right? I mean, you should, I guess ultimately you really shouldn't let judge a book by its cover, right? Just because a guy's a big guy and whatever, you can't just assume that he's going to be a power hitter, right? But at the same time, you got to be more than what Bohm has been when it comes to slug. You can't be a slap singles hitter.
Yeah, if you're going to hit 15 home runs, then you have to be what he was at the start of last season, which was a doubles machine. Like,
right.
Slug does not have, like, it does not need to be. I mean, when he came up, I was like, I'd love to see this third baseman hit 30 home runs a year. That would make me feel great. That is not going to happen, and it doesn't need to happen. But it can't be in this month of May where he's had this resurgence. Like, right? We'd all agree. Like, this is a resurgence. Yeah. 4 home runs and 4 doubles.
Yeah. As Johnny Bissline says, you're fine with what Bohm provides if he plays the middle infield or outfield position. It just doesn't play well at third base. And then Jerry Martin adds, if they had a guy in the lineup that hit 275 on base of 360, it can hit 30-ish home runs in the middle of the lineup, I wouldn't be as mad at Bohm as I am all the time.
I think that's entirely fair.
Right? Both valid points.
Yeah.
You know? Like Alec Bohm can exist in a lineup and in a successful lineup. But when there are the things that you expect out of a third baseman not being provided by others in the lineup, then when he doesn't perform to that level that you expect, that's when it becomes more.
And you know me, I'm certainly not in the business of excuse making, but in defense of Alec Bohm, he's like, this is what I am. You know, like I know what I can do and I know what I have to do to be successful. And I'm sure that he feels it. Like, former top of the first round pick, a lot of expectations. Like, I know what I'm supposed to be. And here I am now hitting third. Here I am now hitting fifth. Like, I know what I need to do here. Like, and then you probably go outside yourself and you try to do too much. Not and just mentally, like just in terms of like your mechanics, over swinging, there's a lot that goes into it. You get outside of yourself. You get outside of what you're good at. And then you see this. Like, I really think it's pretty clear. And you know, that's why I wanted to have the conversation the way that we're having it, because it's not that he stinks. It's not that he's a bum. He's not. He's a good hitter. Like, he's a good hitter in terms of like when he does what he's good at, he's above average at it, you know? Like, he's a guy that I do think can hit 300 in a season. Like, I actually think that he has that in him. But when he does that and then the OPS ends up at 710 because he doesn't walk and pitchers aren't scared of him, you're like, well, what's the value in that? You know, as a third baseman.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It really is. It's the same thing when we were talking about Trey Turner about 3-4 weeks ago, when Turner was getting a bunch of singles and not really doing much else beyond that. And that's when I asked Rob that question about him, and he gave the whole answer about, well, we just want him to get on base 380 and steal 40 bases and not worry about power. And it was like, well, that was kind of an interesting conversation we had that day too. So we're on that same conversation now with Alec Bohm. The difference is Trey Turner's a shortstop and Alec Bohm's a third baseman. And I don't think you can give the same response for somebody who plays third base. You know what I'm saying? He's got to be more than just a singles hitter, especially when you're right. He doesn't get on base and he doesn't provide like a speed element that can turn a walk or a single into a double because he can steal a bag, right? Like, so those things matter. It really does.
Okay. So perfect transition into the next guy I wanted to talk about. What did I call him in text message the other night? The Slap Brothers?
Yes.
Castellanos and Bohm. So Nick Castellanos, right? Like, if I said to you, actually, let's start here. What letter grade would you give Nick Castellanos' season thus far?
A B.
Okay.
And that's the funny thing is, that's knowing what Nick is in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if we were to collectively look at Nick's career, including what he did before he got to Philadelphia, and then say, what would you give his season? I might not be as generous. I might make it more C+ or C, because like you expect more out of him.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you know, the guy does find his way on base. He does get some hits. You know, I mean, they might not be the prettiest hits. And I asked Rob about this too, and he says he sometimes is off balance, but he knows how to get his bat on a ball. And you sometimes look at the swing and it's ugly, but he finds a way to get a hit out.
Yeah, we saw it the other night against the Braves. I mean, he's so long. And he has very good back control, and he's able to get the barrel to the ball no matter where his weight's at. And like there is a skill in that, and he's done a very good job of recording hits doing it this year. It's just such a strange season. If you would have said to me in the beginning of March, look, it's going to be May 31st. You guys are going to do a show, and you're looking at Nick Castellanos numbers, and he's hitting 288. I'm like, okay, 288. I'm in. 328 on base percentage. It's not lighting the world on fire, but it's not terrible. 748 OPS, not bad. Now a lot of that is jumped over those 2 at bats last night. These numbers are actually a little bit worse in the middle of that game last night. But you see his second home run of May. Right now, he's 8 for 16 on this homestand. But again, like you look at this and you're like, he's on pace for 14 homers. He's also on pace for 37 walks. And like this is the gap in it. Like I love 288 for Nick Castellanos all day. And he's putting his bat on the ball more. He's striking out far less. I have the numbers. I'll get to that in a second. But you're like, it's the lack of damage, the lack of power combined with 37 walks. And so I have a hard time making sense of his season. And of course, these two guys had the key at bats in last night's game so far as in the Phillies not maybe making that a baseball game towards the second half. I mean, Schwarber gets on with the double and you have an opportunity to tie the game and these guys don't come through. I guess here's what I'll give you. And I appreciate this. And I got to imagine this is by design. Go back to 2023. He had a 27.6 strikeout rate. And last year that dropped to 21.1%. This year it's down to 18.1%. And you're like, all right, like that seems pretty low. Like, what does that actually mean? 60 qualified outfielders this season in baseball. He has the 14th lowest strikeout percentage among them. Like, this guy has gone from being, gaps everywhere, holes everywhere. You just throw the ball somewhere near the plate and he's going to find a way to get himself out, to pretty patient, maybe not even patience the right word, but he's done a much, much better job getting his bat to the baseball this season. I mean, the improvement has been staggering over the last 2 years. But again, I surmise that he's doing that at the expense of maybe creating some of that additional damage that you want to see.
It's interesting. I had a conversation with Rhys Hoskins yesterday, and this is a fascinating thing. And I wonder if this. I'm going to now ask Nick about it because I wonder if he's thinking about this the same way. So Hoskins, as you know, before last night, he was 0 for 5 last night, but been having a pretty good year for the Milwaukee Brewers. And he talked about, some changes that he made in his swing and how he's, a lot simpler at the plate. He's got rid of the leg kick completely, and, he's trying to get bat to ball a lot quicker. And someone else asked him, if he used Kyle Schwarber as like almost a role model for that, because Schwarber started that last year, obviously, helped him last year to be a better hitter, not just a 3 true outcomes guy. And then obviously that's grown even more this year. And he said, yes, he's like, I pay a lot of attention to Kyle's game and what he's done. And then I asked Rhys, I said, when you see a guy like Schwarber have that success, and now you're having that success, do you think that this is something that might start to become a trend in baseball where you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of the power to get more balls in play and find other ways to get on base? And he said, yeah. He said, with velocity being what it is in the game today, that, with their guys, starters, middle relievers, and closers in the back end of the pen who all can throw 97 to 99, that you're better off, you have a better chance of doing something good by taking a little bit off and just getting your bat on the ball and not have 40 home runs or 35 home runs. Maybe you have 25, but you're going to have a higher batting average, higher on base percentage, and that will help the team. So maybe Nick Castellanos is doing that a little bit too and just hasn't said it publicly. And that's what you're getting is the 289 version of Castellanos, who's not hitting as many home runs or as many doubles, but he's on base a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that is probably what you're seeing to some extent. And you're looking at a situation where it's you want to commend it, but you're also like, at what cost? And I don't know. I don't know what it means for this team. I think that we've seen some sluggish offense here in recent days. I wouldn't want to overreact to it, much the way I wouldn't want to overreact to the Phillies looking like world beaters offensively against, Colorado a week and a half ago. So I am kind of curious to see where this middle's at, as the competition kind of remains more in this not elite but solid teams. Can they get this going? Can they get this back on track a little bit? There are a few other things that I definitely want to get to today. I actually wanted to make a point not to do this, but let's do it. Let's try to do 2 minutes max on this. I this week was ready to put my head through drywall on the retaliation talk. I hate it. I can't stand it. I'm so tired of this. When the team comes out and says, we don't think it's intentional, when the guy that got hit, who was going to miss a week plus, says, I don't think it was intentional. Like, what? Come on, man. Like, do we really have to talk about this for 4 freaking days? Like, do we really have to do this?
Yeah, just real quick, I did have one last note on Castellanos. I just want to say, and then I'll answer that. The interesting thing with Nick, is he's kind of been notoriously been kind of streaky. Like, he's got that reputation to be a streaky guy. This year, he's only had 2 instances where he's gone back-to-back games without a hit.
It's pretty good.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. You would not expect that.
Right, you would not expect that. So it's only twice has he gone back-to-back games without a hit this season. So I put that out there. Yeah, so the Harper thing with the retaliation, like, so he gets hit, he comes out of the game on Tuesday, and Ronald Acuna bats. The next time he comes up, he hits a lazy fly ball to right field, flies out. And on Twitter, I just put out, just for fun, I put out, hey, that innocuous fly out just guaranteed tomorrow's conversation on talk radio that, the Phillies should have been Ronald Acuna Jr. Like, I put it out as a lighthearted funny.
You knew.
Bob, the responses just started flooding in. And then I wake up in the morning and at 7 a.m., the Twitter poll for WIP is, should the Phillies have retaliated and beat somebody? And I was like, oh my God.
Look, I know there are a lot of smart people that are like, yes, and like, they absolutely should have. And it's not just like mouth breathers that are like, it's not how you play ball. What you got to do. You got to hit them back. Again, if you're getting bullied inside and teams are not afraid to come inside on your guys at some point, you want to maybe show that you're awake. I get it. Just didn't feel like that was the situation at all. I don't think that's what we saw at all the other night. And I'm just surprised to like the degree, like the extremes that people are willing to go as they're delivering their opinions on this. Like, if they would have responded, I would have said, okay, cool. And then they didn't. I'm like, they obviously know within that clubhouse, they have a feeling about what happened. And you think if Bryce Harper went into that clubhouse and said, someone needs to, it's a Saturday morning, the kids might be in the car or whatever, however you're watching this, but like Bryce Harper goes in that clubhouse or goes into that dugout and says, I want to see something in return. You don't think that gets delivered? I mean, come on, right?
No,
like,
absolutely.
These guys, they know when it's time to turn it on and when it's not. Bryce Harper went after a pitcher and threw his freaking helmet at the guy and took swings on him at a pitcher's mound at one point in his life. Like, Bryce Harper knows what's up. So if Bryce Harper wanted retaliation or felt that it was merited, Phillies would have backed him up, but he obviously didn't.
Yeah, and so this is the thing that I've been saying since it happened. If you remember last year, Tampa Bay Rays come in here, and Edwin Uceda was their closer at the time, and he had been lights out, like really, really good. He wasn't even giving up base runners. He was so hot, and the Phillies friggin' torched him in a game. I think they scored 4 runs off him, had a couple homers. Bryce had a double. And then so Uceda gets pissed off about it and plunks Castellanos intentionally. Ended up getting suspended for 3 games for it. And Kevin Cash got suspended for a game as manager of the Tampa Bay Rays. And the Phillies reacted. Castellanos barked at him. Harper comes off second base. The dugout empties. When they feel that there's intention behind somebody throwing at them, they're going to respond in some way. You're going to know that they feel that it was intentional.
Yeah, and like, this is a veteran team that has been around the block. Like, they know what's up. They know what's right, what's wrong, how to police the game. It's a bunch of kids that have no clue what they're doing out there saying, like,
Right.
oh no, shouldn't we? Like, the Phillies more than any other team probably have the people in the clubhouse to know when it's time to fire back and when it's not. I don't know, man. I think what gets me about the conversation, not that the conversation isn't interesting, it's just like these extremes. Like, well, this team is soft. It tells you all you need to know about the Phillies, that they won't fire back. They're a bunch of, fill in the blanks. And like, I don't get it, man. Whatever though.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I will say is it's unfortunate that it happened, obviously, because Bryce has now missed in essence 4 games. I mean, he was in the lineup for that game, but it was the first inning, and so he ends up missing all that and then the next 3. He's probably not playing again today, and I'd be surprised if he's back tomorrow. He talked yesterday. I was standing right next to him. His elbow is still swollen. I watched him put his arm sleeve on. He really struggled putting that thing on yesterday. He took fielding practice, took grounders, took throws at first, but didn't throw the ball other than lobbing it, into a bucket or lobbing it to a teammate. Has not swung a bat yet. I can't imagine that he's back before Monday. And so then people would say, well, why not just put him on the IL? They had yesterday, they could have done it retroactively. Because if they had put him on the IL, he would have to be out to next Friday. And I don't think that they wanted to be, they wanted to go on the road trip and have to, play all these games without him, especially if he can come back before then. If they could, why blow 3 games or 4 games without Harper that you don't have to? And that's why they're kind of babying it along the way here.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, I also think, just to kind of finish the thought, you can compartmentalize what happened the other night. Like, I don't like, Phillies observers don't like Spencer Strider. It sucks that your most impactful, well, maybe outside of Kyle Schwarber, your most impactful player got hurt and is going to miss enough time here where you feel it a little bit, and it's probably had an impact on what's happened here over the last couple of days. But I just don't think, I just don't think the situation necessarily meant that it should escalate beyond that. I don't know. I mean, I'm all for retaliation. I'm not like one of these guys that's like, hey, you shouldn't come up and in on a guy or put one on a guy's hip to let him know. Like, I'm all for that. I'm not of like the mindset that that's like a barbaric reaction. I just think that it wasn't necessarily that big of a deal in the moment. That's kind of where I fall on that, because I'm sure everyone's dying to know what I thought about the retaliation.
Speaking of dumb lucking into interviews, I happened to go and talk to Strider.
Dude, it's like the humble brag, right? You're like, I talked to Alec Bohm out on the field.
I'm literally going into that clubhouse just in case it's something, gets said about the intent or whatever. I didn't expect anything. I wasn't expecting anything to really come out of it. And Strider is he gets it. Like, he's one of those guys who really gets the role of being the villain and leans into it and has fun with it. And so to sit there, and when he said, I'm not a complete sociopath and I do have some empathy, and then he talks about what it's like to play in Philadelphia. He goes, I love playing here. They ask about my family, and they care about my well-being. I thought it
was great, actually. It kind of made me like the guy more. I don't know, man.
I'm standing there cracking up. Like, I would, I usually get caught on camera, and I hate getting caught on camera, but I almost wish that in that instance that someone would have caught me on camera.
Were you the reporter that laughed that kind of made him chuckle in return? Like, because
that's me cracking up.
Okay, so you actually, I think, came up on the morning show the other day, because they're like, the camera was like, this guy, he is a sociopath. He was doing his whole, like, the camera shtick, and he goes, like, why did he, like, the reporter laughed, and then he laughed, and like, does he even take it seriously? And like, so him and Seltzer were going back and forth about Strider kind of chuckling in response to your reaction. It was
Jason Stark's question.
Yeah.
That kind of led into that answer. And so I think that because it was Jason Stark is why he kind of gave the answer that he gave. Yeah. And I'm standing right next to Jason, and I'm just, I couldn't keep it in. Like, I was cracking up. I was not expecting that response. So.
Yeah. I mean, The guy's a good pitcher. I hate the mustache and the pants kind of bother me and all that stuff. Like the look, the aesthetic, not for me. But yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. We'll see what happens next time the Phillies and Braves meet up. All right, a couple more things for me here. You've probably noticed the trend where Rob is really keeping his foot on the gas when it comes to his starting pitchers, and I thought that included last night with Taijuan Walker. I mean, Taijuan Walker's not a guy this season who is really giving the Phillies a lot of length. They've obviously moved him from the rotation to the bullpen, back to the rotation. I was surprised last night, though I understood it after the fourth inning. I didn't think that Taijuan was particularly impressive last night. And I thought that he did well to settle down after the first and give the Phillies a chance through 4 innings. And pitch count was creeping up there. And he's back in the game in the fifth, and he puts the 2 on. And I said to you, I texted you in real time. I said, man, like, I know this bullpen is what it is right now, but I'm a little bit surprised they pushed it here with his pitch count where it was, and it burned them. But it burned them in part because they immediately go to the guy that they've sort of been touting is like, look at Tanner Banks. He's pretty good against lefties this year. And here's Christian Yelich, who's been terrible against left-handed pitching and elevated what was his slider.
First pitch. And
boom. And like, I'm not going to get on here and say like, then this shows you why Tanner Banks isn't a guy, or this shows you why, like, I'm not going to do that, but like that was very representative of the Phillies' issue at this moment. Like I think that pushing the starters, like I have a greater concern about pushing the starters that extra inning again and again and again. And you have to find balance. I think there's been times in the past with this team where I'm like, man, like take the training wheels off, like let the guy go get it. But right now I'm seeing the Phillies in May, like take these starters 107, even Wheeler against the Braves the other night. And I know it's Zach Wheeler and he probably dictates to some degree what happens. But like that game, that game was out of reach. And here comes Wheeler back out there down 4-0 and he's at 107. Like maybe we save some of those bullets down the road a little bit. Like we saw him do it with Luzardo over the weekend, give him an extra inning. It's not the first time he's done it with him. Is that something to kind of keep an eye on? And do you almost in some way like take solace in it because you're like Rob knows, like they know this is a clear indication they know how bad this bullpen is or how short this bullpen is. So this is why they're doing it. They're obviously going to correct it.
Yeah, I think that there is a real. So I think we've talked about this and you've even said it. Like you want to go out and give yourself a cushion here at the beginning of the season, like win a bunch of games as when you can, give that cushion that way in case anything happens later, you can kind of address it, figure it out. And I think that the Phillies have kind of looked at these games and said, we got to win them. And as a result, with the bullpen being as unreliable as it is, knowing that your strength is your starting pitching, they're trying to get some length out of the starters now. They know they have Painter coming. They know they can bring Abel up if need be. They could always go through a stretch at some point during the season where they extend it to a 6-man rotation and kind of give these starters a little extra rest. And I think that that's kind of how they're attacking it. Like, let's try and get as many innings as we can out of our starting rotation because that's our bread and butter. And then later in the year, we'll worry. Once we solidify what the bullpen's going to look like, then we'll kind of pull back a little bit then. So I think that that's kind of their plan. Can it be a concern? Can you be worried that, maybe you're getting these guys, you're putting too many innings on the arms of these guys and that it will impact them later? Sure, but I think if you still manage it and keep them around the number of innings that you are comfortable with for the year, then I don't think it really matters when the innings come, right? But if it gets to a point where, holy shit, we're in a race in September and we have to win all these games in September and the bullpen is still not, even though we thought we fixed it, it's still not performing. And now we need to push these guys an extra inning. Maybe this will come back and bite you.
All right. And then off of that, another quick conversation I want to have here. What would you say to somebody that last night tuned in to watch the Phillies and immediately see them fall behind 2-0 and Taijuan Walker's out there? And Taijuan Walker's done a fine job for the Phillies this year. This isn't about Taijuan Walker, really. But as they're watching Taijuan Walker, also watching Mick Abel updates on Twitter, and he's firing away at 98, striking out everybody, taking down Colton Cowser, who's on a rehab assignment, and saying, like, what are we doing? Like, let this kid come up and throw the ball for the big club. Like, what do you say to someone like that takes that position?
I mean, I think it's possible that that's going to happen in the next start. Rob had said it's weird because he kind of walked back on what he had said out west yesterday after the game a little bit, but he also didn't. So when he was out west, he told the reporters that were out there that Walker was going to make the start last night, and then he was going back to the bullpen, and that if they needed another spot start, which it looks like they're going to, as Nola is going to throw a bullpen on Sunday, a full bullpen, he has to do a live BP and then at least one rehab start.
That's turned into a pretty prolonged absence, and certainly not questioning the severity of the injury, but I do wonder if some of their strengths and their options that they've had in this rotation have allowed them to take a more cautious approach than they otherwise would have.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably getting extended about 10 days longer than they probably originally thought, maybe 2 weeks. But anyway, with that said, the idea was that if they needed another start beyond last night, that it would be a call-up because they want to put Walker in the pen and try him in different forms in the pen, whether sometimes it's leverage, sometimes middle relief, sometimes long relief. I just want to figure out what his role needs to be. And you got to determine that now over the course of the next 6 weeks before you really get into the conversation of what we're going to trade for in that bullpen. So I think Mick Abel will probably get that next start. He'll probably be the guy that they recall. That said, Bob, we've kind of been told to keep an eye on Mick Abel as a potential bullpen guy.
Yeah.
That it's been discussed. It's there. It might be part of the plan for later in the year if he doesn't get traded at the deadline, that rather than come up and be that next starter, maybe he's a guy who's throwing 98 and throwing it for strikes.
I know that you were alerted of that a while ago, and then I don't know if you saw Dombrowski on with Heyman and I guess it was Joel Sherman, and they talked about the bullpen. He's like, yeah, we want to obviously go out and add a piece, but also we have, and we've talked about this on this show, we have these starters, we have, you guys all know Andrew Painter, but also we have Mick Abel. Like, he went out of his way to kind of mention Abel as a potential solution in this, and I think he's the likely one if he's not traded.
Yeah. So I think that's ultimately what their intent is going to be. I think they look at it and say, we have a right-handed arm who can come in and go into the back of that bullpen.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that they think Mick Abel is a reliever long-term. It could well be that, hey, just for this season, this is how he's going to help us. And then come March, he's going to be right back being a starting pitcher again. Teams have done that in the past with great success, and we brought up David Price in the past and Adam Wainwright in the past, right? It's been done.
Yeah.
Hell, Ranger Suarez did it for the Phillies, right?
Yeah.
So it's been done. So I think that's probably the internal option that they're looking at to help the bullpen. They just haven't officially said it.
Yeah. All right. I'm a little bit short on time here. My sharks are swirling upstairs. I think my wife is probably staring through the glass door up there saying, where are you? So why don't we do one last thing and I'll go be a dad.
That's fine. And I debated what one last thing was going to be today. And I decided that the more interesting conversation, it relates to the Atlanta Braves. And, I was a guy who was very bullish on the Braves and felt that they were going to be the team that ultimately challenged the Phillies in this division. And then I got to kind of hang around them a little bit this past week. And it was some things that just seemed a little bit off about the team. And, just talking to Brian Snitker, He seemed to be without answers, especially after the game on Tuesday night. I talked to him there.
I think he might be in trouble.
Well, so this is what I was getting to, and this is the point. The one last thing is when AJ Smith-Shawver gets hurt, and now he's out he's got a torn UCL. He's going to be out. He's not going to pitch till 2027. He's out there on the mound, throws a pitch, shakes his arm. It's obvious that he's hurt. Something happened. Nobody reacted except for Spencer Strider. They got this on video. Yeah. And Strider walks over to both Snicker and Rick Kranick, the pitching coach, and is like, "You have to go get him. What are you doing?" Like, and then they finally go out after he throws another pitch.
Yeah.
And gets Trey Turner out, and then they take him out of the game. And he says, and the video catches him saying, "I felt something pop." Like, holy cow! If you're the Atlanta Braves, how do you keep that group in charge when they were completely oblivious to their own pitcher being in that situation?
And I think he's by all accounts, like, even when, Atlanta's been in here in the postseason and you're like, I hate the Braves. Like, Snicker's a guy that I think demands or commands a lot of respect. I think he's a good dude. But like, come on, man. People down there, I think, have been pretty critical of him in recent years, post World Series win. And to me, that might be the final straw. I mean, when you look at that video, if you haven't seen it, go out. It's, just put in, Smith-Shawver, Strider, and like it'll pop up. Like, Strider takes like his hand and like kind of like runs it across his throat, like, yo, like, cut it. Like that, something's wrong here. And he is the one that sees it. It's unfortunate. I mean, and that team stinks. Like, you know what? Here's a hot take, Anthony. Like, watching them this week, like, I wasn't like, oh wow, the Phillies. Like, I was like, this Braves team's not that good. Like, that was like we need to win a series. Like, you're getting our best shot. That's a team, like, you talk about like, oh, like, here you want to see a little bit more out of guys. Like, they have a ton of guys in that team that like should be giving you a little bit more. You just aren't. Like, it's just, they're all like short of what you'd expect. I'm not impressed by them. Like, I don't know what they do well. Like, what's the strength of the Braves? Like, I know it's supposed to be their offense, but like, is it? Like, Acuna is a game changer, and the longer he's there, it's not just a 7-game sample, but like a 30-game sample. Like, I'm sure it'll make a difference. Albies has gotten better. There's more from Olsen and Riley. Like, I understand it. I don't think that Harris is like a, all-star level player, but like, he's not, I don't think he's this bad. He might be, but I don't think he's this bad. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Like,
it's a weird,
and like,
it's
a
weird
Luke, what's his name? The last name, the
Luke
kid that was here,
Williams.
Luke Williams. Like, I don't.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I don't know how that they're planning on getting through with the shortstop of Nick Allen, and Nick Allen got hurt, so he had to come out of the game, and so they really only have Luke Williams to play short. They don't have another shortstop on their 40-man roster. Yeah, they don't have another one. Like, I don't know what the hell they're going to do at that position. The young kid, the catcher, is kind of shown some signs. Drake Baldwin, but Sean Murphy's been disappointing. Their bullpen hasn't been great. Iglesias has been terrible. Their starting pitching's been solid, but then you lose Smith-Shawver, who's been really good for you, and now you got to replace him. And I'm not sure that they have the next guy ready to go in that spot.
Even like last night, they go home and they play the Red Sox. And I don't know if you saw the note. Like, I guess when they were up in Boston, the Red Sox didn't play music during their batting practice. And like, it ticked off a lot of like the Braves veteran players. So pregame last night, Red Sox go to hit and they're like, no music. Like, kind of like, you think like, all right, they're pumped up. They're coming off a win against the Phillies. Like, it's time to respond here. Time to throw a punch. They go out and they score 1 run last night on 6 hits. They're 4 games under 500. Like, we just did this with the Mets last year. We're like, this Mets team stinks when the Phillies are over playing them in London, and then they go crazy for 4 months and win some playoff series. So I'm not saying the Braves are done, but man, they look done. And I know it's always easy to say that when a team's not playing well, but like, this looks different, man. It just looks different.
Yeah, and that's why I wonder if you need a 2022 Phillies shakeup.
Yeah,
where you make the managerial change and then it wakes them up, and they get going in the right direction and they get on that roll. So
it's been a year-to-year decline for them. I mean,
yeah,
they have you think they're kind of bottoming out here.
I'm not completely out on them, but I will admit that being around them and being in that clubhouse, that there's something seems off. So just wanted to point that out. You know, I'm not gonna, I'm not, you know, I will admit my mistakes when they happen, and I'm close to
You
admitting
don't have to admit it yet. It's only May 31st. They can get hot. They can win 15 and 20 and be back in.
I'm close to getting it, but anyway, yeah. So that was my one last thing. All right, I know you got to get going. I know the kids are going crazy upstairs. Let me get us out of here. So don't forget, you can subscribe to us here. Phightin Words on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening there. But we really, really love it when you come to see Phightin Words on YouTube, where we stream live. Come in. If you watch us on YouTube, click the thumbs up, ring the bell, make sure you never miss a show. And if you're listening in the podcast feed and you want to find us on YouTube, go to www.youtube.com/@Phightin Words. So for Bob Wankel, I'm Anthony SanFilippo. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we will be back with you on Monday. Have a good one, everyone.